Trial out of Florida. This is the one where the family is suing a hospital for actions that they say led to a mother's suicide. The Kowalski family suing Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for $220 million in both compensatory and punitive damages. They say Maya Kowalski was hospitalized back in 2015. She suffers from this very rare and very painful condition known as the complex regional pain syndrome. Some have likened the pain to having a finger cut off, without anesthesia. It's just intense. The hospital alleges that Maya's mother, Beata Kowalski, was interfering with her daughter's treatment and insisting that they give her this ketamine infusion, a treatment that she had been getting under prior medical supervision before this flare-up. This concerned the hospital staff members. They report Beata to the child abuse hotline. There's an investigation opened into the matter, and Beata is basically kept from her daughter. For how long? Well, 87 days. She's separated from the child, has rare phone conversations with her. Well, on a night just after those 87 days had passed, Beata kills herself in the garage of the family home. Maya's father, Jack Kowalski, now is alleging that it's the hospital's treatment and the accusation of child abuse that caused her death. The hospital, they say, no, we did everything we were legally required to do. We followed all protocol. We followed all procedures. The family story now is the subject of the Netflix documentary Take Care of Maya, the young lady who suffers from this condition. In court, a nurse who assessed Maya in the pediatric ICU testified for the defense. We're in the defense case now. Let's take a listen to some of her testimony.
Do you have any recollection about difficulties with obtaining vital signs for Maya Kowalski on October 7th?
Yes. When a patient comes into the ICU, we get a full set of vital signs. We get their height, we get their weight. If it wasn't done in the ER, sometimes we'll do it again. But Mrs. Kowalski would not let me take a blood pressure on Maya. She said it was going to cause her pain, and I said, well, we need to have a blood pressure done on her. And she said, well, if she has blood pressure taken, that she needs to be pre-medicated for the blood pressure. I'd never heard that in all those years. I'd never heard of it. And I knew that they said that she had pain, but I'd never heard, and I've had patients with pain issues, kids with cancer and things, but she needed to be pre-medicated. And so we held off on it for a little bit. I was able to put her on the monitor. I was able to see her heart rate and her respiratory rate, her oxygen saturations, that's how much oxygen her blood had. Those were really, that was critical to have that part. And we deferred the blood pressure for a little bit until I can talk to the doctors and see what do we do to give her pain medication for the blood pressure. So we held off on that for a little bit, and we're going to revisit that.
Did you have the opportunity to observe Beata Kowalski's demeanor and behavior in the PICU on that day, October 7th?
Yes.
And how did Beata Kowalski behave in the PICU?
Mrs. Kowalski, when she came in from the beginning, I don't know why, Mrs. Kowalski was very agitated as soon as she came in. I felt like I was starting to walk on eggshells, like she was demanding. She wanted this, even when I was doing that medical assessment, or the hospital intake and assessment, she was right there answering the questions. And I was thinking, okay, maybe that's all right. People don't usually do that, but okay. But she did control the whole thing as I'm going through checking, and it was, I could have said, hey, why don't you just answer all of this? So she was very demanding, and I just felt like she became agitated, and if I didn't do what she wanted, then she would be agitated.
At any point do you recall any swearing or yelling in the PICU that day on October 7th?
There were a lot of F-bombs that had happened in that day. I don't remember all the specifics, but I remember the swearing started. Yeah, I do. I remember actually with both of them, with Maya and her mother, that there were a few F-bombs.
Do you recall at any point Maya using profanity directed at any of the staff members at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital?
I do. Well, in my presence, so she was saying the F-bomb. I want my effing sedation. I want my effing sedation. Then she called Dr. Teppa. I was there, and she called Dr. Teppa an F&AH. She said, "Shut up, you F&AH."
Was that something that you found unusual in your experience as a PICU nurse?
Yes.
Okay, so quite the day there for Nurse Klink at the pediatric ICU. I want my effing medication for my daughter, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an interesting witness for the defense. Again, this is the hospital's witness, clearly using this witness to show that that Beata, now deceased, was out of control and maybe the cause of all the problems that her daughter was complaining of, which led ultimately to her losing contact with her daughter. Bob Mata is here, Catherine Lizardo. So guys, let me start with you, Catherine. She said at one point that when she wanted to take the blood pressure, that they needed to medicate Maya before they could do that because of the pain involved. And this nurse said, who had been a nurse for many years, "I've never heard of that." That to me is so important for the jury because it tells you right from the very start they weren't understanding this girl's pain.
Exactly. I think that should be played and emphasized during closing arguments, because saying that she's never heard that, they are not aware of CRPS. And like you mentioned, it is akin to getting your finger cut off without any sedation. So imagine having your blood pressure taken while that's happening. That's why she needed sedation. She did mention too that Beata was very demanding and seems to be trying to take control. I know they're trying to portray her as out of control, but Beata was a nurse, so she knew what needed to be done. And maybe, I don't know if she knew at that point that Beata was a nurse, but if she did know, then maybe that should have been also taken into account.
Yeah, that is important. I'm not sure how in the nursing practice dropping the F-bombs is part of the protocol, but she was obviously agitated. So Bob, time to play closing argument. Use this witness's testimony now in your best defense closing as it relates to this case.
Come on, man. Why didn't you give me the plaintiff?
Because that would be too easy.
Yeah, I was just sitting there thinking about how like the more witnesses I see, the more I can't stand this case from the defense side of it. It's tough. I mean, basically what you're going to have to establish is that it's a causation issue for the jury. And as much as the plaintiff has tried to show that this woman's suicide was as a direct result of the actions of the hospital staff, they simply haven't met that burden. I mean, what you had here was a series of doctors, nurses, social workers that were all trying their very best to help Maya, and that unfortunately they had a situation with a mother who thought she knew better than these highly trained physicians at one of the world's most prestigious hospitals. And unfortunately, this situation occurred. But it was the plaintiff's burden, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to show that our actions in terms of just providing treatment to this young lady is what resulted in her suicide. And we don't think that they've done that.
All right, I like it. I see. I knew you could rise to that challenge. It's it was the prosecution would be way too easy for you.